This week on the Destination Angler.
And I finally got them up to my feet, and I had no net that I would have had, wouldn't have been ample anyhow. So I just got the fish into the shallow water, into the rocks at my feet, and threw my rod down and got both arms under the fish and threw them up in the bank. And my friend Al said, "I've never seen anything this big in my life." And I said, "Neither have I." I said, "This is the biggest trout I've ever seen." So,
wow. Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haig. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa.
Hey listeners, thanks for tuning in. Our show today is brought to you by J.P. Ross Fly Rods, makers of happiness, one fly rod at a time. Get outside and simply fish. And by Adventure On, your online source for fly fishing gear. We've got an incredible show for you today, but before we dive in, be sure to backcast to last week's podcast on the Adirondacks with rod maker and backcountry angler Jordan Ross. Adirondack State Park is 6 million acres with more wilderness ponds and streams than you can shake a fly rod at. If you want to catch trout that have never seen a fly, be sure to tune into this one. Other shows we have coming your way are Craig, Montana and the Missouri River and landlocked salmon in Maine. You can join in the conversation on Instagram and the Destination Angler Connection on Facebook, where we post a ton of pictures on all the destinations we feature and the top flies our experts recommend. I'd be excited to meet you online. And today our destination is Spring Creek near State College, Pennsylvania, and I have the distinct honor and privilege to welcome our guest, the one and only Joe Humphreys. Spring Creek is one of the finest limestone creeks in central Pennsylvania, famous for wild fish and dense populations, but also because it's Joe's home water. For those of you who may not be aware, Joe is a nationally known fly fisherman, conservationist, author, and educator. Now in his 90s, he's been fishing central PA all of his life, not to mention just about every other part of the world. And he's been a fly fishing instructor to thousands and has traveled the world representing the U.S. in fly fishing competitions, has guided presidents and celebrities, hosted the first national fly fishing show on ESPN, and was inducted into the Fly Fishing Hall of Fame. At one point, he even held the Pennsylvania state record brown trout at 16 pounds, 34 ounces. What a beast. That I understand he took at night, and I look forward to hearing that story. Joe has authored numerous books and articles on the sport of fly fishing and is a regular contributor to regional and national magazines. He's also starred in several highly successful instructional videos and even a documentary about himself called Live the Stream. For 19 years, Joe directed the renowned angling program at Penn State University and has lectured throughout the United States. So Joe's a super busy guy. He also supports our veterans through Project Healing Waters and many conservation organizations. We have so much to cover, in fact, that we're going to do 2 full episodes with Joe. So sit back, pull up a chair, and let's listen in as Joe gives us a fireside chat on trout fishing in central Pennsylvania from a lifetime of experiences. Joe, welcome to the show.
thank you, Steve. I am honored to be your guest today.
Yeah, you bet. So let's just start with that state record brown trout. I saw a picture of that thing. That is a beast. So can you give us the story? How did you get that thing?
Well, it started with me fishing a large pool down below the hatchery on Fishing Creek. That's near Lamar, Pennsylvania. And I heard this fish break, and I thought at first a deer jumped into the water. But I didn't hear any deer running out. And so I realized that was a huge fish.
Wow.
And so I began my quest for that fish. And I worked basically in the tail. It was a long, deep hole. It was probably a couple of 100 yards long. And I worked diligently from the far side. The high bank kind of prohibited activity on the one side. So I worked and waited in the lower part of the pool, no success. I would catch on occasion a decent fish, but not what I was looking for. And I told George Harvey, my mentor, about this, and he said, well, you know, a fish like that oftentimes they'll go up into the faster water where it breaks into the pool. And this is because that fish was a nocturnal feeder. Once they get big, once fish really get from 15 inches above and into the heavyweights, they become nocturnal. So within the riffs, the food supply, like the sculpins, are nocturnal.
Oh.
Crayfish are nocturnal. And a lot of the hatching with your bigger flies, stone flies and other large flies, Dobson flies, they're all nocturnal. And not only that, but there was a bit of backwater at the top where the riff came in, and there were a lot of suckers in that deep hole. And those fish and trout and suckers, smaller trout and suckers and smaller fish, are much easier trapped at night than they are in the daytime.
Yeah.
So I listened to George, and I started my quest the following year, and I worked up around that riff, but I worked the tail too. And in the middle of that pool, there was a tree had fallen down into the pool, and that's where this big fish hung out. That was his home water. And so I worked diligently for a couple of years, and I laugh about this, that I could have very well gotten a divorce over this fish due to the fact that I spent so many nights in the dark of the moon, and then I never, and if the moon was full, I would fish from earlier morning, like from 4 to 5, and for a couple of hours. I wanted that fish so badly. So then the night before, this is the third year on this quest, and the night before, Lefty Cray was writing an article for the Baltimore Sun, and he said, "Would you do an article on night fishing?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And he said, "Can we film it?" And I said, "Yes." So we went to Spruce Creek, and I landed a beautiful fish for him that night. I think it was a 26-inch brown.
Wow.
And I was thrilled the fact that I got such a big fish, and he was just thrilled with the fact that I did so well, enhanced his article. And so I was on a high, and the very next night, there was a little soft rain dropping, and a friend of mine, Al Hagg, who I taught with at Bald Eagle Area High School, called me and said, "Joe," he said, "I am sick of television." He said that, and why don't you go fishing this evening? And I'll just tag along. And he says, we'll get a breath of fresh air and just enjoy an evening. And I said, well, that's a great idea. And I was still on the high from the night before. So I picked up Al, and we went to Fishing Creek and to that pool. And I went down through it the first time, and I caught a fish. I think it might have been 19, and it was a very a nice, healthy fish. And I was excited, and I was very pleased. And now it's past midnight now. Said, well, can we go home now? It's getting pretty late. And I said, well, yeah, but let me run it one more time. And so I went to the top of the pool, up to the riff, and made a cast across the stream into that slower slack water, where I mentioned that there were a lot of suckers and probably bait fish too. And as my flies, I gave them a twitch, and I was using a pair of George Harvey's night flies. And these were very large wings, and these flies had a tremendous amount of movement. They're large flies, and they were, 2s and 4s, and they moved a lot of water. And so I had a pair on, and I made a couple of twitches, and as soon as I cast, I moved them to make sure that both flies are free. And I moved them in a couple of times, and then all at once my rod did an arc, and that big fish grabbed that tail fly, and then I set the hook, and the fish ran the whole way, almost reaching his brush pile. and I put as much pressure on as I could. And I don't go light leader at night. I'm going heavy stuff. I'm going like 13 thousandths, and it's 20-pound test stuff. And so
Sure.
I put the hammer to it, and I turned the fish and got him back up almost to my feet, and then my rod tip kind of hung on in the evergreen boughs over my head. And I flipped the light on real quick to make sure that I could where my rod tip was. And as soon as that light hit the water, the fish took off. And I snubbed him up for the second time. And I finally got him up to my feet. And I had no net that I would have had, wouldn't have been ample anyhow. So I just got the fish into the shallow water, into the rocks at my feet, and threw my rod down and got both arms under the fish and threw them up in the bank. And my friend Al said, I've never seen anything this big in my life. And I said, neither have I. I said, this is the biggest trout I've ever seen. So.
Wow. How many years ago was this?
This is back in I can't remember.
70s, 80s? I saw the picture. It's black and white.
Probably be in the 70s, yeah.
Oh, my gosh. So did you have to kill the thing, or could you let it go?
No, I killed it because I wanted to. I had no idea. I thought it was, so I took it on the way home. The fish warden, Paul Anilowski, lived in Bellefonte, and so I stopped at his house by that time, probably 3 a.m, and I got him out of bed, and he said, what is this about? He says, are you in some kind of trouble? We were friendly. And I said, no. I said, Paul, I got a fish you've got to see. And he says, you woke me to show me some damn fish at this ungodly hour. And I said, yes, I did. And I said, I think, I don't know what a record is, but I think I might have a record. And then the record was in length, not in weight, because there had been a lot of cheating going on, I guess. And so people were stuffing lead down a fish or whatever. And so the record was 33 inches and mine was 34. So,
oh my goodness.
So I had the new record. So, yeah.
And you got that with your buddy Al Haig, what you call it a night fly. What is a night fly?
Yes, that was the George Harvey night fly. Yeah.
Was that like a Dobson fly, or what is that?
Well, it's you use wings like goose wings. You tie them, and you can color them, or you can do whatever you want to with them. But you tie them facing the curve, facing out. So when the water hits them, they push back and then come forward. And so it's and then it's heavily palmered. The body is a lot of fur with a real heavily palmered the whole way, and then I palmer the right in behind the wings to brace them forward, and then I put a heavy hackle in the front for movement, and so it's a
good one.
Perpetual motion fly, you might say, and it's very effective. Yeah.
Yeah.
And George Harvey created this, and because he was a night fisherman, and he tried to figure out what kind of a fly can I tie that has a lot of movement and is big, has a lot of movement, and is an attention getter. So that's what he created, and it certainly was an attention getter. Yes.
I'll say it's a minnow imitation.
No, it's it would mostly imitate a crayfish, with the claws.
Yeah, right.
And when they move, how they move. And so I think it imitates more of a crayfish than it would anything else.
That's a great story. Hey, anglers, if you get excited about small stream fishing, then you need to know about JP Ross fly rods. If being outside nurtures your soul, if holding a fish of any size is like gold to you, if you believe that a fly rod should be a reflection of yourself and what you love, then you need to know about JP Ross fly rods. JP Ross produces many types of handmade fly rods, over 7,000 since 1997, but they are best known for their small stream collection and their passion for building relationships with their customers to help them be happy by being outside. I had a chance to fish one of these gems recently in Michigan and was blown away with its performance, beauty, and effortless casting. JP Ross himself was featured on my recent podcast on the Adirondacks, so check that out when you get a minute. And you can check out JP Ross Fly Rods at, you guessed it, jprossflyrods.com. Be sure to mention coupon code HAPPYFISH to receive $50 off any rod purchase. Like I always say, if you know how many fly rods you have, you don't have enough. So put a smile on your face and pick up a JP Ross fly rod before your next trip. Get outside and simply fish. And I'm also curious, I read that you've guided Jimmy Carter, Dick Cheney, Liam Neeson, and maybe a few others. What's that like, guiding these super famous people?
Well, every one of those gentlemen are absolutely gentlemen, and they're on the stream. We're all together. We're excited about what we do, the challenge of the fish before us. How can we catch them? What do we have to do? And we're all on the same page. And every one of my guests that were famous, we're all the same when it comes to fishing,
Yeah.
And they were just wonderful people. And President Carter was a wonderful guest and real fine angler. He's a good caster and he knows how to catch fish. But that was with him. It was his first dealing with nymph fishing. And somebody asked him how it went, and he said, "Well, at first it was kind of like dealing with Congress." and then he said, "But he did learn, and one of the things that he said, I think I'm catching bigger fish underneath than I am on top." And so, but he was, I so enjoyed it. And I've been with him a couple times, and then he was I was just in awe, and because he was such a wonderful person.
Yeah, seems like it.
He was a great leader of our country and a wonderful gentleman and such a superhuman person. And, all the work he has done with humanity, the projects, building, and he's just and his wife Rosalind, and she's an outstanding fly fisher. George Harvey worked with her on slack leader cast, and when she was fishing the trico hatch on Spruce Creek one time, I think George told me she caught in one area close to 20 fish in one morning with the trico. And because, George was a stickler in this profession, and he, relative to the slack leader cast, where he really created and designed through a lot of experimentation. And he found out that the real heavy tippets the real heavy leaders get away with as heavy a leader as you can, because it's the drift, not the leader, that catches the fish, because those flies have to float so naturally, so natural that fish will intercept something that's coming to them as they see all the insects on a perfectly natural drift, but they refuse something that's going at a different speed. And so that's what George created with his leader, was that slack leader cast, which gave that perfectly natural float. So, this is how Rosalind was so successful, and President Carter himself, And so I don't think we can find two more wonderful people than this earth than those two. They're just so special, yeah.
Yeah.
But Liam Neeson, he was, and I consider him a dear friend, and he did a wonderful testimony for me. It was shown in New York City, and we had such a wonderful time together. And he caught a couple of real heavy fish, and he just loves to fly fish and so enjoys the nature of the game, and again, all the beauty around the streams when he's fishing. He does appreciate what the good Lord has given us, and so he's just a wonderful, wonderful person.
I've heard about that.
I would love to fish with him again. So,
well, I hope he gets back out there.
Maybe before I pass away.
Oh my goodness!
And Steve, I am 92, not 90. So
you're 92.
I'm climbing in age, and as I noticed now, the years seem to go faster. So,
My goodness. Hey, it's just a number, right, Joe?
it's just a number. Yeah, that's true. It's just a number.
Right.
And so, I said that in my lifetime, I think that the secret of longevity is something really exciting to look forward to every day. Something you want to do, or something, or maybe a fly that say, can I tie a fly that is even more effective as a streamer, or can I improve on a nymph, or, you have something to look forward to, and it's so, I think that, and I know that you, Steve, as an artist, and when you're painting and you see the beauty around you, and you have something that before you that's exciting, and then that the beauty that you're looking upon, and you're saying, if I can only capture this on canvas,
Exactly.
and so it's exciting for you, and as things are for me, yes.
Right. Well, and looking forward to that next fishing trip. I've always got to have a fishing trip on the schedule. I'm going steelhead fishing
Yes.
into March, and I'm
Yes.
going trout fishing in Colorado in July. And I don't know. Yeah. And I imagine you've got some trips on your calendar coming up, I'm guessing.
Oh, I do. And one of the things that the season opens in Pennsylvania this year earlier. It opens on April the 3rd. And so, yes, I'm excited. I've already had one of my COVID shots, and I get the second one in March, and by April I should be in pretty good shape. And so I am looking forward to, and I'm praying my friends that I fish with, and we open the season with. There's a half a dozen of us that open the season every year together, and we start here at my house with a good dinner, and then the morning of the fishing season, we go to the Corner Room restaurant in State College, and everybody else is fishing by this time. But then we fish on the Bald Eagle stream near Milesburg, Pennsylvania, and the Spring Creek joins the Bald Eagle at Milesburg in Pennsylvania, and so that's a great patch of water. And so then we make sure that we're at Mr. Hot Dog, the restaurant that has great hot dogs, and we have to be there by noon. And so that we know that we'll fish Spring Creek and parts of it, and still the Bald Eagle. But at 6 o'clock, then it's necessary to be at Jim's restaurant in Bellefonte for our evening meal. And so, it's fishing, it's camaraderie, it's fun, it's exciting, but it's also good eating and relaxation. So it's something that we always look forward to.
Yeah, and good company.
It's not do or die fishing. It's just a lot of fun.
Yeah. I'm curious, in your movie at the end, you were trying to convince that group to go night fishing with you on opening day.
Yeah,
were you successful? Did they go, or was it just you?
No. I was just trying to pull their leg of it, and
okay.
But I think I had them convinced maybe that I was going to try it. I don't think I'm not too sure they would have even gone along.
Yeah. Are you one of these guys? I got a feeling you're one of these guys. You always have a little more energy than everybody else in the group. You're always sort of like ready to go, and you're the last guy off the stream. Is that kind of you?
Yeah, that's me. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. Good for you. Joe, you have fished all over the world, and I'm curious, so what does central Pennsylvania, or maybe just Pennsylvania in general, have that really sets it apart?
Well, and I'm so fortunate to have been raised in central Pennsylvania from childhood. And, I was born in Curvensville, Pennsylvania, which is 50 miles up the road. But during the Depression, my father had a job in the bank. And during the Depression of 29, the banks closed, and my father lost his job. And we had, the wall-to-wall nothing and back-to-the-wall payments and type of thing. And so my father said Curvensville was his home, but there was no future there. And he wanted his children educated. And so we came to State College, where there was a Pennsylvania, not the university then, it was just Pennsylvania State College.
Yeah.
And so we moved to State College and rented a big old house, big old brick house, and we rented the middle floor out to students. We had 4 rooms there and rented those rooms to students for some income. And then in the summer, we tried to take tourists. And my father got a job finally at the university in the bursar's office, and I think $1,000 a year. So, but we made it. And the wonderful part of this is that we settled in central Pennsylvania, and where the finest streams in the country are, as far as I'm concerned. I know there are great rivers, the Rock, and the big rivers, the Yellowstone, the Madison, some of these great rivers in the West, and there's so many of them throughout the country. But central Pennsylvania it's limestone country. And in this country, in the limestone country, we have a lot of springs. And all these mountain streams dump into the underground system.
Okay.
And throughout our system, and on Spring Creek particularly, and they call it Spring Creek for a reason, because there are a myriad of springs along the course of the stream itself. And so you have the perfect setup. You have the water quality. The big springs are producing the cold water for trout to inhabit, and it's a mecca for fish and for fishermen.
I got you. Fish and fish food too.
Oh yes. So with Spring Creek, we don't have the food chain that we once had. Back in the 70s, the university dumped a vat of sodium cyanide into Spring Creek.
Oh man!
It went through the treatment plant and right down through Thompson Run and into Spring Creek, and it killed just about everything.
Oh my gosh!
And it went even down to the hatcheries in Bellefonte, the Fisherman's Paradise hatchery, and we had backhoes dumping fish into pits that they dug. It was a horrible thing. And so Spring Creek was shot, but it did come back. And this is where your big springs keep pumping great water. And it did come back, but some of the hatches never did.
Yeah, still to this day.
At one time when I was a boy, we had the green drake, we had the Hendricksons, we had slate drakes, we had, you name it. It was so prolific, and we always had the freshwater shrimp and crest bugs, and with a lot of minnow life relative to reproduction of trout and suckers. And so the food supply, the dinner table was really set on Spring Creek.
I see.
And because of such a prolific aquatic insect hatch and insects, yeah.
Yeah, has it come back today where you've got some of these hatches back?
Well, we have a wonderful sulfur hatch on Spring Creek, and we have the blue-winged olive in early spring, and we do have a lot of caddis. And there are other hatches but we still do not have the green drake, nor do we have the Hendrickson, and we don't have the stoneflies. The stoneflies are coming back.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So, and people have tried the green drake hatch, but they went and picked up green drake flies and eggs from the Penn Creek green drakes, but they never took.
Oh, they tried that.
For the green drakes, you have to have excellent water quality, and those Spring Creek and the springs still do a wonderful job, but we still don't quite have the water quality that we had at one time.
Okay.
And part of that is probably because the population explosion in the area.
Oh, what's that doing to it?
Well, we don't have the water that we used to have. For instance, when I was a kid, there were 4 or 5 springs that I knew that where they came in, and there were always trout in those areas because of the colder water.
Sure.
And some of those springs that I fished around are not even there anymore. They're not there. They're gone. So I think that the aquifer has changed relative to the population. We're pulling so much water from it, and so its population explosion has changed the water quality because we don't have near the water that we had, and it's probably not as clean and clear as it was because of water coming off the roads and
Sure.
more highways and more traffic, and there's a lot of things that degrade a good stream. But though we do have an excellent trout population, and we still do have ample insects to feed them, and the food chain is there, but not quite as prolific as it was at one time.
Okay. And I had read that Spring Creek actually has one of the highest trout populations per mile in the state.
Yes, I'm sure it does. We do have good reproduction, and you have to have decent enough water quality to have that reproduction. So that's good.
Yeah. And it's wild fish then.
Yes, it's wild fish.
That makes a big difference.
Well, yes, yeah, but we have hatcheries on Spring Creek, and I'm sure that some fish, when they finish taking all the fish out of the raceways for stocking, some do enter Spring Creek, that they get away from them, and they sometimes just flush them out. So we have a few fish coming from the hatcheries, but that's good. That's good.
Yeah, a few. Okay. Hey anglers, I wanted to tell you about a great online source for fly fishing gear I only recently discovered called Adventuron. A few weeks ago, I was looking for a pair of Simms mitts for an upcoming steelhead fishing trip, and after searching the web for quite some time, I found them for way less on Adventuron. Now, I'd never heard of these guys before, and honestly, I thought there's got to be some kind of a catch because they were so much less expensive than everybody else. But I decided to give them a shot, and well, lo and behold, my new Simms mitts arrived as advertised in just 3 days, plenty of time for my steelhead fishing trip. Boy, was I impressed. Turns out Adventuron is a family-owned retailer of outdoor gear based in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. They are one of the largest authorized dealers for fly fishing gear with top brands such as Simms, Scientific Anglers, Ross, Able, Redington, and many more. And they offer free shipping and have a low price guarantee and will match any competitor's price on checkout. The cool thing is you can actually still talk to a live human being on the phone. Imagine that, via email or chat as well. So if you want low prices and exceptional service on top brands, give Adventuron a try. That's Aventuron. And be sure to mention coupon code podcast15 to land your 15% off orders of any regularly priced fly fishing gear. That's Adventuron, your online source for fly fishing gear. Joe, for those people who might not be familiar, can you tell us, where is Spring Creek, first of all, and then kind of describe the character of the water and how it sort of changes as it goes from top to bottom?
Well, Spring Creek is located directly in central Pennsylvania at State College. The headwaters are in the mountains. There's a mountain stream and I'm not going to mention the name, but there's a mountain stream that dumps into the aquifer, and it comes up, and there are different springs, and it runs quite a while through the meadows. There's a very small stream, but then there's a stream called Slab Cabin. It doesn't have quite the water quality, but there are some springs along its course that the Thompson Spring, and the Thompson, that big spring, is one of the finest sources of cold water, and it's right in, comes out of State College, right, almost not far from downtown State College, and so Thompson Spring and Thompson Run dumps into or enhances Spring Creek, and then we have what they call the Bass Gate Springs. There is a dairy that produces milk and milk products. But behind that dairy, there's big, beautiful springs that flow into the Thompson Run. And so from Lemont, Pennsylvania, there's a Thornton Spring, and there's other springs that come in along its course. And so Spring Creek gets its name, rightfully so. And then as it goes down through into the penitentiary lands, the mighty spring, called the Benner Spring, it has been harnessed now, and piped into a hatchery, but it isn't quite the quality that it was going in when I was a kid. That big spring flowing into Spring Creek was huge, and it was really a mecca for brook trout and big browns too. And so that big spring has been, as I say, harnessed, and now it's the source of the Benner Springs hatchery, and they raise trout there, and then it enters Spring Creek, but it doesn't have quite the quality that it did years ago, but it's still good cold water.
Sure.
And so that enhances Spring Creek. So we have so many great springs. And then when you get to Bellefonte, they have magnificent springs there that are huge and really push out a lot of cold water. So, Spring Creek is Spring Creek. So we have
lots of good sections.
And like I say, it doesn't have the water quality that it used to, but it's still a wonderful stream. And like you say, it has a tremendous trout population. So
yeah,
even I can catch a fish on occasion. That's how good it is.
It's a blind squirrel finding a nut every now and then for me.
Yeah,
anyway.
right. I get the nut every once in a while.
In how's public access?
I don't think there's no problem from State College the whole way through, from Lemont down through. Yeah, it's accessible, and so much of it goes through penitentiary lands, and you are permitted to fish, so there's no problem. Yeah.
Okay. And there's some remote wooded sections there too, right?
Yes, there are. It goes down through in the penitentiary lands. It goes down through a lot of wooded land, and it's fishable, but you have to work at it. It's kind of tough to get into sometimes.
Oh, is it? Okay. Would you say does it get crowded, especially when there's some good hatches going on or maybe closer to State College?
Yeah, well, Spring Creek has had so much publicity over the years. We had the Spring Creek at the famous Fisherman's Paradise.
Sure.
Fisherman's Paradise was the first all-fly fishing project, I think, maybe in the United States, if not the world. And it started in 1942 or 1943. And it was 1 mile of stream and fly fishing only, barbless hooks, and you were permitted 5 trips at no cost. You were given a button and you had a card with your name on, and it started on May the 15th and ended on July 31st, and no Sunday fishing. And at one point, I remember when I was a kid, and I rode my bicycle the 10 miles down, and I was a little late, and it was the opening day at Fisherman's Paradise, and I couldn't find a place to fish in that 1 mile of stream. It was shoulder to shoulder.
Wow.
On that day, there were 3,000 fishermen on 1 mile of stream.
Oh, my goodness.
So that's how popular it was. And it was popular because it was well stocked with a lot of big fish, and people were after the heavyweights. And so it was so much fun. It was so exciting. And so this is, how Spring Creek became a nationally known.
Yeah.
And then, we had the great anglers like Ray Bergman and you name it. If the guy had a name, he had fished Fisherman's Paradise. Yeah.
What can a decent angler expect in a day on fishing or on Spring Creek today? I mean, what's, average numbers and size, that kind of thing?
Well, we have good fish. We have great numbers. Our big fish are disappearing, and this is something that I don't know how to curtail it or what to do about it, but people have a penchant for, once they get a big fish, they want to photograph it. And then Spring Creek is all catch release, but you get a big fish, and sometimes I'll lip hook one just with the thumb and just lift it quickly, get a picture and drop it right back in. But when people catch big fish and they try to photograph them and they're out of the water far too long and they don't make it. And so this happens far too frequently. And I know that some people do still kill fish when they're not supposed to. If they get a sizable fish, I've seen it done. They'll kill it and stick it in the back pocket and move on.
Right.
And so we still have big fish, but not in the numbers that they used to be.
Not as many. Joe, let's zoom out for a minute. And what are some of the other streams that you really like there in central Pennsylvania?
Well, I certainly enjoy Penn Creek. It's a mighty stream, and I enjoy like the Fishing Creek where I took the big fish. There are the Bald Eagle, particularly from Milesburg down to the Sayers Dam. That's a beautiful piece of water, and it has a lot of great fish. So, as I say, we're so blessed here.
Yeah.
With these big streams, yes.
Which stream would you say is the most technical?
Fishing Creek can be tough because of the clarity of the water and the native fish within. If you walk up on the stream, or even when wading, if you're not careful, those fish go out ahead of you. They can be difficult. You can pick more fish up in broken water. But here again, the fish population in Fishing Creek is excellent, but still not what it used to be.
You saw better.
At one time they stocked it, and now that they don't stock it, but at one time they stocked it. And it was that we had bigger fish, and after, they didn't stock it after June, and then the fishing pressure abated because a lot of people just wanted to, once they stock, they want to go after the fish that are put in. And then, but once the stocking is stopped and the fish population was still there, and we had bigger fish, and it was easier fishing. But now it's tougher, yeah.
Okay.
And anytime you're fishing for just natives only, it can be difficult.
No, that's good. And I want to get into some of the technical stuff with you a little bit later, but I am curious, Joe, for everybody in the listening audience, then when did you fall in love with fishing, and in fly fishing in particular? And I'm kind of curious, maybe you can talk a little bit about what is it about fly fishing today that holds your interest?
Okay. Well, shall I begin?
Sure. Let's hear the story. Yeah. How did it all start?
My father took me fishing when I was 6 years old, and he didn't know any more about it than I did. And so he bought me up for $7, I think it was $7.50, a 7.5 foot kingfisher rod. And then I had I don't know what we had on the line. I think it was just a straight level line. And so the season opened then on Spring Creek and in Pennsylvania at 5 a.m. Now it doesn't, because of people, when they stock streams and people get there too early before daylight, they catch a limit or so and more fish than they should maybe. And so they moved it to daylight. And so, but back then it was at 5 a.m. And so my father drove. In fact, the road that we drove on is no longer. It's went across penitentiary lands, and it's done gone. So anyhow, but we drove down this road, and there was a little island in the middle of Spring Creek that split the stream, and there was the smallest portion of the stream was where we were fishing with worms. and I had a worm on the hook, and I got the worm in the water, and I felt a tugging, and I lifted the rod quickly, and little fish came flying up over my head and dropped off the hook behind me.
Perfect.
And I was crawling around on my hands and knees trying to find the fish, and all at once I saw the weeds wiggling. And so I picked up the fish, and it was an 8-inch brown trout, and I was absolutely thrilled. And so my father above me hooked a foot-long brown trout, and he threw the rod down and grabbed the line and pulled the fish in hand over hand. So you talk about neophytes, we were absolute neophytes. So, but anyhow, we paraded those 2 trout up and down the stream because we thought we were pretty cool. But my mother made a sandwich for me out of that little brown trout. Before she made that sandwich, we had it in a pan of water, and it was dead, but naturally. But I couldn't take my eyes off that little fish. The halos and the red spots and little orange spots, and it was just magnificent. It was all the beauty in the world was wrapped up in that little fish. And so my mother made me a sandwich, and I thought it was the best tasting sandwich that I had ever eaten. And yet today, once in a while, I'll kill a smaller trout and make that same sandwich.
You still do that today?
Absolutely. Oh, once in a while, I just do it because it brings back my youth, I guess.
Great memories.
Great memory. So then as time progressed and Fisherman's Paradise was in its heyday and fly fishing was a big thing because of Fisherman's Paradise. And we had a few anglers that were outstanding fly fishermen, like George Harvey and my old friend that lived across the street. His name was Clyde Scheffler, and he taught me how to fish wet flies. But the top guns, like George, and there were a couple others, they didn't share a lot. Back in those days, I learned this the hard way, and I'm good at it, and I can take fish, and I'm not going to give up my secrets to anybody.
Oh, really?
I'm the top gun, and if you want to learn this game, you're going to do it just the way I did. I'm not going to show you anything. But then later on, after when George and I became friends, and he was getting me ready to take over for him at Penn State, then he opened up a little bit.
Oh, he did? Just a little, huh?
Oh, yeah, a little bit.
He was still a mentor? Even though he didn't tell you a lot, he was still a mentor for you?
Oh, yes. Yeah, he was my mentor, yeah.
Why is that?
Well, he wanted me to take the program over, and he wanted me to be as good as I could be, and to benefit the students.
Okay.
And so, and he said, you want to know everything about this game that you possibly can, day and night. So, and then that spurred me on to be as good as I could possibly be so I could give the students as much information and help them as much as I possibly could. So, yeah.
Okay. So he did help you a little bit there because you were going to take the program over?
Oh, yeah, sure he did. He helped me a lot, yes.
Okay.
He gave a lot of lessons, little lessons. Here's an example. We were fishing a stream in northern Pennsylvania, and he said to me when we started to fish, "What rod are you going to use?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to use this rod. I'm going to use my 7.5 foot because the stream was smaller and it was a bit brushy." And I said, "I'm going to use a smaller rod." And he said, "Oh, okay." So it ended up that he was on one side of the stream and I was on the other. And so we went up, worked up the stream, and he was catching maybe 3 or 4 fish to every one I would catch.
Yeah. I hate when that happens.
Yeah, I was getting it handed to me, and I was frustrated. And so at the end of the day, I said, "George," I said, "you caught so many more fish than I did." And I said, "What fly were you using?" And he said, "I was using the same fly you were." And I said, "Are you sure?" And he said, "Well, here's the fly I'm using. Look at it." And it was a humpy. And I said, "Oh." Well, that's what I was eating. And he said, I know. He said, I saw you tie it on. And I said, well, is that your leader design? I said, I have what I thought would work. I said, I have a good long tippet, and for the brushy stream that it was, I said that I could control. And he says, well, yeah, that looks good to me. I said, well, what was your secret? And he said, you chose a 7.5 foot rod. He said, I chose because I knew that it was more open than brushy, real tight streams. He says, I used an 8-foot rod. And he says, I could lift over more currents and hold my flies in the productive areas much longer than you could. And he said, that was the secret of the day. So he said, the length of the rod is an important item. Think about it.
Yeah.
How much line can you lift off the water? And how long can you hold those flies in a productive area as naturally and as long as you can? And so that was these were tips and insights that I learned and that he gave me. So, yeah.
Great tip. So that might have been a moment when the lights really went on.
Oh, sure.
I mean, was there any other moments where you thought that is really something that I need to incorporate into what I'm doing? Any other moments?
Oh, yeah. I remember one time we were on Spruce Creek, and he said to me, okay, we're going to fish this patch of water, and I want to watch you take a fish. And he said, he took me to this one glide, and there were a couple of fish raising steadily. And he said, okay, this one is yours. And he says, go for it. And so I was full of confidence, and I figured, well, I know this game. I'll show George how good I am. And so I made the cast, and the trout came up and had his nose on the fly and followed it and then disappeared. And so pretty soon he came back feeding steadily again, and I made another cast, and he did the same thing. He came up and looked at it and let it go by. And after about the third or fourth cast, and the same thing happened, George stepped around me, made the cast, and caught the fish. And I'm saying, you
awful.
son of a gun. So I said, all right. I said, here again, it's the fly. I said, what were you using to catch that fish? He said, it wasn't the fly. He says, I'm fishing a deer hair ant, and you're fishing the deer hair ant. We're both fishing the same fly. And I said, okay, what did I do? What am I not doing? And he said, look at your leader. He said, your leader construction just doesn't cut it. He said, you had a drag over that fish. That fly was traveling at an unnatural speed every time that went over that fish. That's why he refused it. And he said, my tippet was much longer than yours, and my leader design was what caught the fish. It wasn't the fly.
Yeah, and back then you were tying your own leaders, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, so I learned that, yes. And then I learned that not only was the leader design the thing, but the slack leader cast. The cast that caught that fish with that leader, I was straightening the line out.
Oh, okay.
He was shocking it and dropping it and getting all that slack in the tippet and for the natural drift. And so we had a long, perfectly natural drift over a fish that saw those insects coming over him the same way all day. And so there wasn't the fly was exactly what was on his menu. Deer hair ants at that time of the year were perfectly natural. And so with the leader design and the slack leader cast that enhanced that design and that drift was what caught those fish.
Okay.
So I learned so much from those experiences with George on the water.
And just real quick for everybody, when you say slack leader cast, can you describe what that is?
Well, your tippet is designed to the density of the fly you're fishing. And it can be, your tippet can be 30 inches long with smaller flies. It can be even a little longer. And so what you do with this leader, with this cast, you shock it. It's a very short stroke up over your head.
Yeah.
Your rod from 12 o'clock goes to a very short cast, inches. And then as soon as you shock it, you drop the rod tip, and the rod tip comes down before the fly hits the water. And all that leader is now coming down almost in a pile.
I see.
And so that's the secret. So you shock it and you drop it and you get the rod tip down before the fly ever hits the water.
Okay.
And that stacks the leader.
You're putting some slack into the line then. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You don't put the slack in the line. You put the slack into the leader.
Into the leader. Gotcha.
A lot of guys, yeah. The slack is in the leader. You can have a lot of loose line on the water and still have a perfectly unnatural drift because your leaders, you can, a lot of people like a reach cast and they throw the fly at an angle and then reach to, and they think they're getting all the line upstream for a much longer drift.
Yeah.
And what happens is you straighten the leader out. But if you would have had the leader built right and you would have shocked the cast, then reach and then drop, then you have it. But you just can't have a reach cast and expect it to do the job.
Okay.
And today, with leader design and a lot of the companies are into this, and they are enhancing the fly fisherman and giving him probably a decent leader for a good drift.
A little bit of an edge. Yeah. Joe, you have spent your life really pouring into others, educating really the world on fly fishing and, of course, students coming through Penn State. Can you give us a little bit of your philosophy on teaching fly fishing? I imagine there's a lot of moms and dads out there who want their kids to get into fishing. What kinds of things can you tell us?
Well, one thing, like casting, you have to be able to get the fly on the water to catch the fish.
Yeah.
And I know today we're so many instructors, and it goes from coast to coast, and people, it doesn't make any difference. Like if you're fishing a lake, it's different. But the 10 to 2 cast is taught most of the time. And so far as I'm concerned, and George Harvey and the top guns that I've fished with, the casting stroke is much shorter. And I stop the rod straight up over my head. And the forward stroke is short. I'm not stretching it out in front of me to 10 o'clock or whatever, to 2 or whatever. My casting stroke is extremely short. And what this does, it gives you that slack. That's the insight to a slack leader cast. Okay. Then when you're nymphing, I'm driving the nymph down, and that rod tip is still high, and that gives me a perfect line from rod tip to nymph with line control.
Okay.
And then when I'm in tight brush, if I don't have almost an imperceptible casting stroke, I'm in everything but the water. My fly has never found the water. So the shorter casting stroke, I think, enhances so many aspects of the game. Then the second thing is line control. And if you don't have line control, then you don't catch fish. And so today with the bobber fishing, and I don't fish bobbers, and those are bubbles. You have the
indicators,
the nymphing, the nymph below your indicator, and or your bubble, your floater. And so, yeah, you can catch some fish. Your indicator, your bobber goes under, and you pull, and you have a fish. But without the bobber, now you have nothing but a leader. Now you have to have, and if you have excellent line control, you're going to outfish anybody with a bobber. Not in all cases, because there's some flat water situations that are very difficult, and there's some very weedy streams that are difficult. But overall, if you don't have a strike indicator and you're using your techniques from rod tip to fly with your leader, and you have good line control, excellent control, you're gonna be in the ball game. You're gonna catch fish.
Right. So that's the tight line nymphing approach then.
Yes, right. And then also with wet flies, that's a game that I think people have forgotten about. They're talking about everything soft tackle. the wet flies of eons of time, plates of them, hundreds of them, thousands of them, since the Macedonians. They used soft hackles, hand hackles for all the wet flies. And so with winged wet flies, with soft hackles, there's movement. And if you just simply have a hackle on the hook, it's a hand hackle. It's soft hackle. It's moving.
Yeah.
You can use so many other birds or grouse or whatever, and that's still soft hackle, and it's still a wet fly. And you can, with winged wets, they can be deadly. And so the wet fly game is how I learned early in life. Of all of my early fishing was basically, some dry fly fishing, because you saw fish come up on top. As a kid, you tried to catch them. But wet flies, I found as a youngster, I could cover so much more water, and I could catch, covering more water, and particularly when the hatches were moving, I could catch far more fish. So the wet fly game is here again. You have to have line control.
Yeah.
And if you have your rod tip pointed down at the water, you're not going to catch fish, because fish have to, when you hook a fish, they inhale the fly. If your line is straight, they can't get it in. So if you have an angle from rod tip down and your rod tip is up when you're working your wet flies, you're going to catch more fish, because now when they take, they can inhale it because there's give.
I hadn't thought of that. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So these are little tips and little things that, this is all in line control too. Yeah.
I've seen you, some videos that you've done where you're teaching young adults, maybe even kids, how to fly fish. Do you start them off on the grass and the lawn first, or what tips can you give some dads about that?
Well, when you teach casting and you have like I'm working with a group of children, you can really work with them stopping the rod up. You can really hand on hand enhance their short forward stroke, and then you can condition those kids to the activity and to the process, and they learn so quickly. It's amazing. I've worked with like busloads of fifth graders, and they are amazing how quick they learn and how well they retain it.
Do you think fly fishing's for everyone, or do you find that there's some people that just gravitate towards it?
Oh, I think fly fishing is for everyone. Yeah. Everyone. Yeah. Little boys, little girls, they're all, they and sometimes the little girls are more attentive and more into it than some of the little boys. So, And sometimes when those little children hit the stream, the little girls outfish the little boys. So, yeah.
Is that right? Okay.
I got a story. How about a 10-second story?
Yeah, let's hear it.
I'm working with a group of children, and these kids are fifth graders. And I had a whole busload of them from Windber, Pennsylvania. And so I have them at Fisherman's Paradise. And this little boy, his name was Adrian, and his father brought him along. He was only a first grader. He was 7 years old, but he brought him along, and I included him in the class with the others. But the little kid was kind of very advanced for his age. So he said to me after casting class, he said, "Now, are you going to take us on the stream this afternoon?" And I said, "Yes." Well, he said, "If you want to catch fish for us this afternoon, this is what you do." He says, "You take a black woolly bugger." And he says, "You fish it down and across the stream." And he says, "Fish it slow." And I said, "Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the insights." So I'm down on the stream, and I have all these children behind me. And I fish down through, and I miss a trout. And I turned to the children, and I said, "I just missed a fish." And I think maybe you saw me. And the fish turned, and I missed it. And I said, "Now I'm going to fish down through in front of you just a bit, and then I'm going to rest this fish, and then I'm going to come back and see if I can catch it." And so I fished down through, and I said, now I'm going to go back and see if I can catch this fish. And so I went back upstream, and little Adrian grabbed me by the sleeve and said, this time, he said, set the hook. so the little kid said, that's the last thing I was ready for, but
Darn
prepared for. But this little kid, he said, the first time, you missed the fish, you didn't set the hook. So this time, set the hook.
Didn't set the hook.
Oh, it was funny. And I did set the hook, and I did catch the fish. And so
That's
I handed
hilarious.
the rod to a little girl, and she finished landing the fish. But it was just, I'll never forget that. He says, this time, set the hook.
Oh, the dad must have been cringing back there behind him.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Oh, that's a good story.
And, from these little kids, they're so darling, and they're so with it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for listening, folks, to episode 1 with Joe Humphreys. We'll post pictures of Joe, his flies, and that state record brown trout on Instagram and Facebook. Feel free to email me with your comments and suggestions at shaig50@gmail.com. And if you like the show, hey, spread the word and tell your buddies about the Destination Angler podcast. As always, our music is by A Brothers Fountain. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we will see you next time for episode 2 with the one and only Joe Humphreys.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see.